What is going on, golf fans? It's your boy, GS Luke, here with our Round 4 live stream for the API. Going to get you guys ready for all of your lineups tomorrow with all of your questions down there in the live chat. We'll go through a weather report, some of the strategy out there for the final day of action, as well as some shots gained metrics, any deep dives that you guys want out there on players, as well as a look at some of the contests that we have available out there for tomorrow and how to approach building all of those lineups. But first off, hopefully you're having a fantastic Saturday. We've got some UFC lineups. I'm going out there and sweating myself, which, by the way, the SHIPIT Nation was the source that I used for all of my projections. So hopefully we can go out there and cash out on a few lineups, as well as a tournament that looks like it's going to be a whole lot of fun tomorrow. I'll be there in person. I've already bought my ticket for the Sunday Carnage. I was considering heading up out there for rounds 3 and 4. Held off today. Actually had some unforeseen circumstances that kept me from heading up to the golf course, which, frankly, I'm kind of glad I didn't have to see all the shit rise to the top. I was talking to my guy Nick earlier saying that this slate today was a toilet bowl, and instead of the cream rising to the top like you hear at a lot of slates, it was like the shit rose to the top of the toilet out there on this slate. So there's a lot of guys up there that aren't really known as closers, guys like Henley that choke quite a bit, Corey Connors far from a Sunday killer. So I think it's going to be quite volatile out there for tomorrow, and the weather forecast is going to lean into that as well. So I'm super stoked. I literally could not pass up watching it in person. So we bought our ticket. I'll be there, boots on the ground out there tomorrow, and I'm stoked for it, as I said. But we got Go Collect down there, chat. Also Nick Marsh as well. We got Wayne, Luke, also Justin Lee, Steven, Brian, and Dennis. Hopefully you guys are having a swell evening and are ready to talk some golf for tomorrow. But we'll start it off with a look at the golf course for today, which played exactly as we expected. And I mentioned on the live stream yesterday that there's morning starters, there's guys going off with that advantage, could play to about a half a stroke advantage, and it actually played to about a 0.7 stroke advantage today. So about 0.68 strokes between the morning and the afternoon, which was useful because if you sort this by score today, a lot of those players went off in the first half. And Andrew Novak would have been the poster boy for that. You still had guys like Morikawa, Henley in the PM side that went out there and had themselves a day. But a lot of your over par players, like a Daniel Berger, another one of those super early players, how even a Michael Kim was on the first half of tee times, were the players that you had to have in Showdown today. So, a little bit of chalk got there, but a lot of those early players with the weather edge, the ones that you wanted out there for today. And this was without any sort of wind, right? The wind was pretty consistent from morning to afternoon. This was just the greens getting crustier and firmer and faster as the day went on. Tomorrow, you're going to have weather on top of that. And by weather, I mean a whole lot of wind that is coming through. So up until about 10, maybe 11 a.m. local time, you've got sub 7 miles an hour of winds. But right about 11, it's like a switch is turned on. It goes upwards of 10 miles an hour sustained. In fact, it's in that 11 to 15 mile an hour range up until about 4 p.m. local. And your wind gusts go from about 10, maybe 12 miles an hour in the morning to closer to 20 miles an hour in the afternoon. And when you have the course getting firmer and faster and these winds that are going to cause havoc out there on that back nine, I think you're going to see scoring go through the roof. So it was about a 0.7 stroke difference today. I think tomorrow you're looking at least a stroke difference between the two sides. It's worth noting that some of your boarding guys are still going to get hit by some of this wind. It's just that the earlier tee time that you have, the less of that wind that you're going to have to play through. And if we go over here to the tee time tab, you can see the tee times for tomorrow. Xander Schauffele is going off first at 9:15. So these guys in the first, let's say, hour and a half of tee times, they might be able to play about half their round before conditions really get nasty. And by default, right, even without all that wind out there today, we still had like a 0.7 shot difference to go out there and play with. So I would be looking towards some of those early starters for that leverage. But because it is Sunday Showdown, we do have the placement points in play out there for the final day. You can't completely just go out there and stack the early starters. You're likely going to need at least two players up there towards the top. Probably the inevitable winner. Also somebody that shoots something like -3, -4, and ends up finishing in that top 3. And then I think the last 3, maybe 4 positions in your lineup are going to want to be some of these early guys that have those conditions. And I think it's kind of limited. Like guys like Xander, especially because he's going off by himself, he's going to be able to play at least half of his rounds before those winds really kick up. But even a group like this Stevens JT Poston group that's going off at 9:25, it doesn't kick up truly until about noon, right? That's when it gets up to that 14 miles an hour sustained. you're talking about a 3-hour window there where, if you're a 2-sum, right, behind a 1-sum ahead of you, right, you're not going to be keeping up with him. You could finish your round in about a 3.5-hour pace. And if that's the case, you're finishing 14, 15 of your holes before that wind really starts to become a factor. So I would say that these first 3-4 groups are the main ones that would get an advantage. Now, there's a lot of slapdick down here, right? A lot of guys that kind of sucked. Like Hadman shot +6 today. God, he was about as bad as he could possibly be. Aubert looked really off. Same thing with guys like Xander, right? That's why he's teeing off first. But these are some high-quality players, right? We've got Ludwig up there. We've got even Sam Stevens, who makes a bunch of birdies. JT Poston, who still cannot buy a putt for his absolute life, that if you want to go out there and take a shot on conditions, are going to be playing on much better conditions than the afternoon players. But as I previously mentioned, it's not like you can only go out there and take those early players because we have those Sunday placement points in play. So just something to consider out there with your process. I would say personally, I would want at least 3 early starters in every single lineup. So at least 3 pieces of leverage out there in every contest, if not 4. Out there in my build. So you might have 2, maybe 3 guys starting up there towards the top, which sounds like par for the golf course, but it's maybe 1 less stand up top just because of this weather that we have in the afternoon. And if you want to lean into that weather edge even a little bit more, make that your stand, your narrative that you're playing around for tomorrow, you could make an argument out there to go out there and play 4, maybe even 5 guys out there from the morning and have 1, maybe the winner out there in your lineup, maybe 2 guys up there towards the top, and 4 players in the ideal conditions that you're also taking at lower ownership. Because the other aspect that we have to think about here, and I'm going to bring up my projection sheet. So this is not the SHIPIT Nation stuff, so just full transparency there. This is what I post over there on my Patreon page. This is the top end of the ownership. So I've got this sorted by this ownership tab here. I haven't filled out my player pool yet. So just because there's no one down as a yes does not mean, right, I'm fading the entire top end of the board. But you've got guys like Henley over there at -9 at over 40% ownership, Colin Morikawa at 42.7%, and then even your other guys that are there like -3 or better, like a Corey Connors is nearly 40% owned, Jason Day 30.4% himself. All of these sort of players, they're going to get so much more attention than the rest of the field that game theory-wise, if you can find any reason to go out there and avoid them in lineups, you probably should. And with that weather that we have in play, that's why I think leveraging against some of these players would make a whole lot of sense. So if you go out there, you play 1, maybe 2 of them in a lineup, you can see all of that leverage that you're getting. Like, sure, you might be playing a guy that's 20% owned in the spot, maybe 30, 40% owned with one of these top 3 or 4 players. If you do that, it looks like you're taking a whole bunch of chalk. But if you only play those 2, look at all these guys that you're avoiding, right? You've got 40% owned players up here that you're likely not including. You got all these 25, 30% sort of players that you could go out there and get leverage against. I think that's where the edge comes in on a slate like this. So, of course, guys, SHIPIT will have their own projections posted at some point tonight. I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of a reference point out there on some of these players. And I can't scroll down because I can't show you guys all my projections, of course. That wouldn't be fair to the people that pay to my website. But the bottom end of the board, the guys that, in the middle end of the leaderboard, and especially the guys down there at the bottom, you've got a bunch of sub 3%ers out there on this sort of slate. Even the mid-tier guys, you have a lot of players that are like 5, maybe 6% owned at the very most, that are 4, sometimes even 5 or 6 times lower owned than their players towards the top end of the board. So you're going to have 1, maybe 2 of them, as I mentioned before. But on a slate like this, where they're getting the harder side of the draw, don't feel like you have to play everyone towards the top. So that's my PSA on ownership. This is a slate to go out there and play that game theory, in my opinion, and to try and fade some of that pressure, right? It's not just the conditions that'll be working against these guys, but it's also the pressure of being in contention at a PGA Tour event. So consider that aspect as well. We've got the shots gained metrics up. So now we're going to do any player deep dives that you guys want down there in the chat. We're also going to go through some of the round 3 shots gained metrics as well. And I also need to catch up on chat. So let's go ahead and do that right now. Let's see. So Xander's off by himself. So he said, just as you thought you were out, he pulls you right back in. I knew Nick would be playing him, that's for sure. Yeah, a whole bunch of choking out there today. Wyndham Clark, add him to that list as well, Wayne. We'll see how they play tomorrow, right? Plenty of golf left to make up that ground. What's going on? Goku Lex said, when Scotty could be a good round for it. We got Luke down there, another Luke who is tilting, who I got to say, that's on brand for us Lukes. Sorry to hear that for you, bro. Wind seems worse around 1 p.m. Eastern time, might be better for the last groups. Yeah, you mean better for the last groups, meaning the guys that are towards the bottom end of the leaderboard. I'm also going off first, then yes. I don't think it's good for the guys that are going off last, right? If it's getting worse as the day goes on, like Steven said, that is going to be carnage as the day goes on. You said you're not playing X, Brian. Hey, you can leave them to guys like Nick, right? He wants them to be low owned, so that's totally fine if you're not going to play him as well. What's going on, Dennis? What's going on, Sean? Ludwig totally is your bounce back guy. I'm throwing today out. I'm with you on that. I haven't made my player pool yet, but up top, there's only a few guys that you can use for leverage. Like a Cantlay will be low owned. Sam Burns, I've also got at sub 10% ownership. So if you've got to make a stand up top and try and get different to the rest of the field, he's probably my favorite of the bunch because before today, his ball striking was the best by far of all of those sort of players. So I'm right there with you, man. Unrelated, you watched Rebel Bridge on Netflix. Okay. So a little bit of a recommendation, I guess, down there to the chat. What's going on, Dan? He said Kaba seemingly doing everything right so far. The key word there, so far, Dan. He does have a little bit of a sketchy Sunday record. So I know he's trying to correct that. He mentioned that in his post-round interview. So we'll have to see whether it works out for him. Going right back to Scotty, can he suck 4 days in a row? You know, it's crazy how we say that he sucks, right? And then he's there at -2 and up there towards the top end of the board. Yeah, Scotty, when he's sucking in contention, is a Scotty I'll play, because if we're saying that he stinks, right, and he's up there in positioning, I mean, imagine if he plays well, right? How good that's going to look, especially when you have a day that is as windy as what we have. He's one of the best wind players that we have in the world. The irons are hot for Colin, that is for sure. And the putter hasn't really heated up yet. Today it was a little bit better than rounds 1 and 2, but he's yet to go out there and really have a super nuke round. What's going on, Alan? Looks like the morning wave is the way to go. Yes, for your leverage, you might need 1 or 2 guys for those placement points, but they're getting the better side of conditions for sure. You play everyone that goes out alone. Yep. And yeah, you're talking to Brian there, and he tracks it. Yeah, dude, Nick knows his shit, right? He doesn't just say stuff for the hell of it. And it's just process-based, right? He always plays the guy that goes out alone. McGreevy could have sucked today, just like he said, but Nick's always going to play his guy. And that's something that's very respectable, by the way. It's something that you guys could learn from down there in the live chat, is having a process and sticking to it and not overreacting to like a 1-round sample size is one of the best things that you can do in DFS, right? Having, 4 maybe to 10 data points to work with before you start to adjust things is very important. Into, hey, me and Nick have been doing this a long time. I've been doing it longer than Nick, but hey, he's been ever since I was new to actually YouTube. I had less than 1,000 subscribers when Nick first reached out to me. He's been playing since then. So I know he's been around for a while. Let's put it that way. What's going on, Dennis? Kaba had some unreal approach shots today, gained almost 4 strokes on approach for sure. Kaba's a god and will definitely win this event. Hey, I see what you're doing there, Nick. Wink, wink. Clark needs to call that sports coach. He looked checked out. I agree with that. And what I've got to say about Wyndham is that as soon as his caddy on the last hole said, hey, stop thinking about technique, just feel the shot, go out there and hit a shot. What did he do on hole number 18, right? He hit the ball to about 10 feet for a birdie, didn't make the putt. That would have really gotten him back into the round. Actually, it might have been for par. If maybe I'm misremembering that. Either way, to hit a really good shot, right? After having that advice from his caddy, if he can lean into that tomorrow, I love Wyndham. I think he could go out there and do some scoring, because the putter is not going to be as cold as what it was today. He's one of the best putters that we have in the world. I have no concerns about a bounce back there. It's that he's got to hit the ball better. And maybe his guy Ellis will go out there and get him going out there for Sunday, but that was the best shot of the day, and it's a shame it came on 18. So I've got to say he's a bounce back candidate that I'm looking at. Shane Lowry too, and we'll talk about Lowry in a second. Michael Kim, so yeah, Michael Kim, hell of a day, birdie, bogey free, -5 rounds, good stuff. And what do I think about Scotty's putting grip? So good question, Brian, because I use it myself sometimes. I use the claw when I'm struggling on the greens. I'm a conventional putter 90% of the time, but when I'm missing my speed, when I'm missing my lines, I go to a claw grip because it feels more stable and it feels like a safer grip. Now, I make less putts with it. I've tracked it. I've taken my rounds where I've used it and compared it to rounds where I haven't. I'm a much better conventional putter, but it's a way to fix your putting. And I think for Scotty that he's got to change it at some point. He's the sort of player that is a feel-based player. He's one of the best lag putters that we have in all the PGA Tour. And when he's lag putting, he uses his conventional grip. And he said that, he won't use that claw grip when he's putting from 30 to 40 feet because he doesn't have that same sort of feel. So I think Scotty last year in his putting was a little bit of a short-term fix because that's what it is for me. I don't use that claw grip unless I really have things going sideways and I'm in a money match against my friends. Like, it helps me making some 5-6 footers because I can start the ball in line a little bit better, but you lose all of your feel when you use a grip like that. The putter head, and again, if you're not a golfer, this might not make a whole bunch of sense, but I know Brian is. He's from Scotland. They all golf out there. The club, when it sits in your hands, right, you have that feel. You can feel the club face swinging, right? That's important when you're putting. You have to have that feel. If you want to be one of the best putters in the world, you don't have that when you have the claw grip. So I know a little bit of a rant there, but I hate the putting grip. I only use it when I have to, and he's using it all the time, which is a crutch. I don't think it's going to work out long term. I think eventually his putting is going to start to suck because Colin does it too. Colin, right? Like, he has a few good events, but it's a crutch. He'll never be a great putter by using that sort of grip. I've never seen one putter that I've said is a great putter that uses the claw grip. Not one. You can't, and maybe chat can help me out with this, right? Because there's 71 of you, which, by the way, smash the like button if you guys haven't already. But there's 71 of you. Tell me one good putter that's used the claw grip. I really can't think of one. Clark had originally had his original caddy today, and he had a fill in the first few days. I noticed that, so maybe that did take the vibes off a little bit. He'll be with Ellis tomorrow, though, and I liked what he said out there on 18. So I think it's a good thing he has this guy back. You're thinking playing team bounce back tomorrow with Lowry and all these sort of players. And let's talk about Lowry. So I promised you would mention Shane Lowry, and the shots gained metrics we're going to go through here in a second. It's not really shots gained based. If we're getting these sort of wins tomorrow, and obviously I'm not going to give away my entire player pool here on stream because I'm still playing against a bunch of you, right? Out there in GPPs, and Patreon is where you can find all my player pool, right? That's why it's there. But if you're telling me it's going to be windy tomorrow afternoon, then why not play Shane Lowry, the luck of the Irish, who, of course, is maybe the best win player that we have in the field? Why not play Scotty Scheffler, who's also arguably one of the best win players that we have in the entire world? I think tomorrow, these stats are going to slightly matter, right? There will be guys that I play because of their shots gained metrics in round number 3, but I'm also going to have a lot of guys in my player pool that are good rounds for historical players, right? So from over there on the stone, right, looking at guys that excel on Sundays, I'm also going to have guys that are good wind players that excel when we get these sort of conditions because, Lowry, I could see shooting -2, -3 in these windy sort of conditions. I could see a Scotty Scheffler shooting a -2, a -3. I can't say that about the entire top end of the board. You've got players up here that are known for choking under pressure. You've got players up here that are known for not being good wind players. And, I hate to pick on you, Colin, but you're both of them, right? You choke and you're not good in the wind. So I wonder how he's going to play tomorrow. Russell Henley, he's one of the biggest chokers that we have on tour. Hell, I hate to pick on these guys, but it's true. Of pretty much the entire top 6 here, all these guys that are T5 or better, you can say that all of them are known as chokers. All of them have choked recently, and none of them are good wind players except for Corey Connors. Now, Corey Connors is a choker, right? So he does have that other thing working against him. So of this top end of the board, I'm not really sold on anyone going out there and shooting like -3, -4. In fact, if these top 6 players all shot over par, I would not be mind blown, which leaves Shane Lowry here at -4. Hey, he shoots his -3. He could win this golf tournament. You go down here to guys like Rory. He's a really good wind player, right? Make fun of him on Sundays all you want, right? He chokes too. You got to add him in with some of those other clowns up there towards the top end of the board. But he's a good wind player. Robert McIntyre, need I say anything else? He's a Scotsman, right? They're all, for the most part, really good in the wind. But hey, we saw him win at the Genesis Scottish Open in the nastiest conditions that I've ever seen. Aaron Rai also won a Scottish Open when conditions got really nasty. He is a really good wind player. Wyndham Clark, by the way, you take a look at his wind splits. He's really good in the wind. Scotty Scheffler, we already mentioned him. Justin Rose. What is the common denominator with all of these players? They're all really good in the wind. These guys some of them are okay. Like, Corey Connors, he's really the one that kind of sticks out. Jason Day too, he's not a terrible wind player, right? I'll give credit where credit's due. But these chasers, there's enough really good wind players chasing them that I think that these are the nuts plays out there for Showdown. So top end of the board, right? You might have to have one, maybe two of them out there in lineups for that placement point aspect. But I think my favorite placement point plays are going to be these guys here at like T10, T13 that are known as really good grinders and wind players. And you can say that about Justin Thomas as well. He's got some of the better win track records of anyone in the world. I mean, won a PGA championship on a windy day, won a Players Championship on a windy weekend, coming from way behind. You have Daniel Berger, who's known for that as well. A lot of his PGA national success over there at the Honda Classic has come with conditions like we're getting for tomorrow. Tommy Fleetwood is known for that same sort of thing. A lot of these players, even these T23s, like, going the whole way back to a Tommy Fleetwood here, this could be where some of your placement points come from, because I think a -3, a -4 round tomorrow, you're starting at even par, you're ending up at like -3, -4. That could be a top 5 finish with how tough these conditions are going to be. So I would say to open your mind up a little bit when it comes to your placement points. I think you're going to see a lot of this top end of the board struggle tomorrow. Now, you might get the one or two of them, and if they do go out there and play well, and they're up there at the top, they win this thing. Like, you tell me right now, if you're any of these top 4 players shoot like -2, they win. Like, I'm totally fine saying that with any of these guys that are -7. But if none of them do, it could very easily be one of these chasers. So that's it for the placement point perspective. Like, that's what I want to point out there, is that I think there's going to be a ton of variance, a ton of volatility when it comes to these leaderboard positions, and something to incorporate in your process. Now, looking at the stats out here from round number 3, it's usually like what we focus on over here on these Showdown streams. This will be really useful for some of our players towards the bottom. So Brian Harmon, of course, they're at T41, right? If you're looking for a player that's going off early on the softer conditions, right, maybe it's some of these approach poppers that you can find. Now, some of them are towards the top end of the board, like you have with Morikawa, even Michael Kim, Daniel Berger up there at T17 or better. But you go down a little bit further, you find a Lucas Glover who continues to really hit the ball well on approach. You got players like Patrick Cantlay, who, despite losing 4 strokes putting today, did gain in the 2 ball striking categories. And you can try and find some of your pivots to get, a little bit different to the rest of the board. Now, you can still use these for some of your placement point players. Like, you can see there, McIntyre had a pretty solid ball striking day. Matt Fitzpatrick, who's pretty good in the wind, also had a pretty solid ball striking day. And you can see there, right, Corey Connors, Jason Day, also some of the better wind players that we have in this field were hitting their irons well out there in round number 3. So, these stats, I would say, would be a little bit more valuable out there for your guys further down the board, just because, with your conviction plays, to go back to like the full event stats, you're looking for your guys to play up there in the top 5. I kind of like looking at the full event stuff, right? Seeing what happened over the first 3 rounds, getting an idea for who has the most sustainable skill set, which, by the way, if we take a look at this, Morikawa does have the best skill set of all these sort of players. So, if you're a truther at looking at the shots gained metrics, you're probably playing Colin Morikawa over there for tomorrow. And the reason for that, of course, is that he hasn't been putter heavy. That's why I think he has the most sustainable shots gained metrics of anyone towards the top. But these round 3 stats are where you can find some of those diamonds in the rough. We can take a look at your regular shots gained ball striking. So top end of that list also has Morikawa for today, but also a few maybe lower owned players like a Sam Stevens. He just could not do anything out there with his short game. You got guys like Novak. That's how he carried his game today. But slightly sneakier players, Tommy Fleetwood and Matt Fitzpatrick, they show up in this ball striking category, just like they did over there on approach. But Justin Rose, known as a pretty solid grinder. You got Max McGreevy, right, who went off by himself today. Patrick Cantlay showing up there once again. All players are getting a slight boost in my modeling. Now, guys that gained a whole bunch of strokes with their putting, also with the around the green, guys that you might want to raise a red flag on. So you can see there, Andrew Novak, even though he was solid with his ball striking stats, he gained over 4 strokes out there around the green and putting. So not the sort of thing I'd expect to happen 2 days in a row. You can say the same thing about Bazane. He gained over 3 strokes between his short game categories. Tony Finau gained over 2.5 strokes putting, something that is very unlikely to happen 2 days in a row. And some of these guys are good short game players. Like, for example, I guess Tommy Fleetwood, maybe not the best example, but like a Denny McCarthy, perfect example of this, right? Like, he gained putting. he could totally gain 2 strokes putting again tomorrow. He's one of the best putters that we have in the world. But Tony Finau, right, somebody that's a lot sketchier out there in the greens, is highly unlikely to go out there and gain 2.5 strokes putting multiple rounds in a row. So I'd be looking for a little bit of negative regression from these sort of players, especially if they're going to be chalk. So unfortunately for Jason Day, though he's a good wins player, he did go out there and gain a bunch putting. Russell Henley, especially with that birdie streak that he had today, I was chipping in and making birdies from everywhere. That is probably not going to happen 2 days in a row. And then, as we already mentioned before, guys like Andrew Novak, Christian Bezuidenhout, who gained over 3 strokes in the category, 4.5 strokes over there for Andrew Novak. Players I'm actively avoiding in my process. We can go over here to around the green as well. So that's where Henley would be number 1 in the field. Unfortunately for Robert McIntyre, who did look solid in a lot of other categories, he was his best around the green, which is probably not going to carry his game 2 days in a row. Eric Cole, Ben Griffin, Tom Hoagie all got a little bit lucky when it came to their chipping today. And it's not like it was terrible. Like, you gain a stroke and a half around the green, like whatever, right? Like that's not that big of an outlier. But when it's, you're gaining 2 around the green and you're gaining a bunch putting, like Andrew Novak, right, as we mentioned a few times, that's where it really starts to become a problem for me. Going back to the full event stats, so if we're going to use this whole event as in general to go out there and find plays, Lucas Glover looks like the absolute nuts on approach. Just at some point has to make a putt this week. So he'll be a player I'm using for some leverage. And Nick Taylor, same thing, gaining over 4 strokes on approach, but losing with the putter. JJ Spawn also there at T33, relatively early tee time, gaining on approach and losing with the putter. You could say the same thing about JT. Also, JT Poston, look at that. Both JTs putting and hitting the ball pretty much the same way this week are all guys that with the earlier tee times, maybe not so much with JT like Justin Thomas, right? He's T17, so he'll be teeing off towards the latter half of the day. But these other guys, like especially Poston down here at T49, I know they probably tilted a lot of people with how they played in Showdown the last few days, but Sunday Showdown could be a really good spot to buy low. So a lot of that's conditions based, right? With them getting the lower wins early in the day, but also the leverage and the ability to move up the leaderboards when you end up getting that sort of player right. So just that's how I can use the shots gain metrics to my advantage. Of course, guys, over there in SHIPIT Nation, they have the stone posted, which you can find the round for historical on. That is the absolute nuts out there for Sunday as well. I'm trying to find guys that can handle that Sunday pressure. You've got the approach series, the putting series over there as well, which is always a very useful part in my process. You combine that with a little bit of game theory, that weather advantage that we talked about before, and of course, your regular shots gained metrics that we just went through together. And you should be deep diving even more yourself over here with these shots gained metrics. And you've got yourself a recipe for success over there for tomorrow. So we'll go over any specific player poll questions that you have now together. After we're going to go through some contest selection, try and find a few contests that are the best EV out there for tomorrow. And then a little bit of lineup construction stuff as well. But before we do so, let me catch up on the live chat. Let's see. Meissner, I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing, Brian, but maybe it's a guy that went off by himself that played well. Xander was never the play today, killed so many lineups. He's never the play until he is, Chris. So we'll see how he plays tomorrow. 0 good claw putters, total loser move. Yeah, I'm glad that somebody was able to confirm that for me down there in the chat. Like, I've seen a few that are okay, right, that have hot weeks, but never somebody that's like, wow, that's one of the best putters that we have in the world. You're holding full weight of the putter in one hand with fingers on the other, no feel or control. Totally agree with that. I mean, right, you drive the putter with the left when you have the claw, right? And then the right, where you have the claw down the grip, it's just there for the ride. You're hardly using it whatsoever. It's a bad move for me. Chris is tilting in chat. Hey, I'm a tilter too. I feel you, man. Tomorrow's a new day. Off the top of your head, do you think Scotty is on the A for round 4 scoring? He is, Nick. A few other guys that come to mind as well. You're willing to go back to Xander only because he's alone. Your process is not your process. Exactly, right? We mentioned a few things. I mentioned that's your process down there in chat. That doesn't mean all of you guys have to go out there and do it as well, right? We're just mentioning different ways to go out there and get to players. I would say I like Xander because he got an early tee time, right? It's not really that he's going off by himself. You think Jason Day wins this thing? Hey, I've got the Malbon on. I've got the Malbon hat, Malbon shirt going on right now, so I wouldn't be against it. Would I say that 9:30 would be the time to cut off for the early advantage? No, that's too early, right? If you use 9:30, there's only 3 groups that you could possibly have. So if it was 9:30, you would literally only have the Sam Stevens, Poston, and Xander Schauffele. I don't think there's really a cutoff that you should be using. I would say the earlier the tee time that you have, the better, because the greens are going to get crunchier, right? That's why you have that 0.7 shot advantage today. And then the winds are also going to make the course a little bit crunchier. So it's not really a cutoff thing for me. I would say I'd rather have a 10:30 tee time than going off last over here at 1:45. I'd rather have an 11:15 tee time than going off at 11:55. So I think that's probably the better way to look at it personally. Thoughts on Harman? Deep dive for tomorrow. He won in bad conditions in Scotland. Yeah, he's known as a little bit of a wind grinder. The thing with him is that he can't make any putts recently. Today, he was super good on approach. Love to see that, right? Lost 4 strokes off the tee. That maybe not so positive. But the putter has left a lot to be desired over the last few events. He did at least gain out there in round number 1. Round 2 reverted to losing with the putter. I would say that he's a good flyer play, right? He's T41. He's going off relatively early. He is going to play in some winds towards the latter half of his round. So maybe it's good that he hits the ball low. We'll be able to take those on for his last maybe 6 to 9 holes. He'll be playing in some wind tomorrow. But yeah, the shots gained on approach today were rather impressive. The wind is going to pick up tomorrow when the leaders tee off. So that's not necessarily true. It's going to kick off a little bit before then, but in general, you're right? As the day goes on, it is going to get worse, but they have it kicking up around 10, maybe 11 a.m. local time, which if we go back to the tee times over here is smack dab in the middle. So it's right about when this Patrick Rogers, Lucas Glover group is going off. So you've got some groups going off before then, but a solid amount going on after, right? You have all these different groups that are going on after that wind kicks up. So, yeah, I kind of agree with you, but I did want to clarify that. Hole locations just posted. Do I think they water the greens? Let me bring them up. I think I heard a lot of the broadcast talking about that. In fact, on the last hole, Kisner was like, oh, they better water these greens. They're getting out of hand out there. I would say that there's a chance they do just because you heard it from so many players. ESPN Plus, even those announcers were mentioning that they need to water the greens, but I really hope they don't. Or if they don't, it's going to be really fun out there to watch tomorrow. If they do, I don't know if it's so much pin location based. 18's your normal pin at 18, 17's a really tough pin. This is your normal Sunday setup. So we're not going to go through all the different slopes on here together, but these are the normal pins that you see for this sort of round. They might put a little bit of water on them just so that the greens don't die, but they're not going to get softer. Let's put it that way, right? They always want round 4 at this course to be brutal. It is almost always a stroke or 2 over par for a scoring average. And that's probably not going to change. In effect, going back to today, right? I know we had players complaining about it, but it played under par, right? The scoring average for the round was still 0.3 under par. So I don't think they need to put water on it. I heard the broadcast mentioning it. I heard even the ESPN Plus guys doing it, but I think they're soft. I think they're just soft as Charmin. They really don't need it. The course was easy enough. Harman is too low to the ground for the wind to bother him. Yeah, that low center of gravity working to his advantage. You're looking at Xander and Aberg. Could they be safe to use? Safe's not the word I'd use. They're going off early. They're starting towards the bottom end of the board. This is an event where you're guaranteed a paycheck, right? If you made it to the weekend, they could easily shoot over par. That really would not surprise me, but they do have better conditions than the rest of the field and they're low owned. So I wouldn't call them a safe play, but they are a high leverage play. And high leverage plays are usually a little bit riskier, but when they hit, you're not sharing them with 40% of the field like you have with some of the other players. How many people do I like to have starting inside the top 15? 1 or 2 max, maybe 2 or 3 if you're pushing it, but 1 or 2 because of that weather advantage. Is Kirk a good round 4 player or deep dive since he's got the 1050? I'll do the deep dive. I don't have the round 4 historical stuff in front of me, right? I'm going to wait for the stone to be able to take a look at that sort of stuff. But to give you the stats from round number 3, let's take a look at that right now. So he lost across the board except for the putter. If you take a look at the event as a whole, it gives us a slightly better idea. Stat-wise, he doesn't set up very well, but he does have a good track record around this golf course. And he's T33. So like you said, slightly earlier tee time. He's not one of the first groups off or anything, but an earlier tee time than what you have with those later starters. And has at least a track record of him playing well around here. So he's not my favorite play, full transparency, but he's at least within reason. Like, I don't think you're crazy for considering them in the process. All right, let's go through some contest selection. So if you're going to try and find some contests to go out there and enter, they've got some decent ones posted. So you've got this big 555. It's super top heavy like always. It's a fourth the first place. We can see 400 entries in that 555 and a whole 12 max. So that's a good, healthy contest. We've also got the big sand trap for tomorrow. They call it the final round finale out there for Sunday. Way too top heavy for my liking, though. It is a third to first place. So kind of like that 555. I mean, if you want a lottery contest, it could go to one of those two. Third one here, we've got the 4 entry, $250, $1,000 to go out there and max enter. This one's 20% to first place, which it isn't ideal, but it is a little bit better than what we normally see. A lot of times it'll be like 25 or even 30% out there to first place. The drive the green is super top heavy. So while today it was a lot better, also round 2, I believe it was 12.5% to first place. Now it's 33% to first place again. So, we've got some larger contests out there for tomorrow, but I really don't like the payout structure of any of them. What I like a little bit more would be the single entries, which this single entry a little bit larger than what you had for rounds 2 and 3. Over 300 entries as opposed to 200 the first few days. Also, only a sixth over there to first place. So a little bit of a better payout structure. You also have this one over here too, which is a little bit of a smaller $100 single entry. The payout structure is pretty similar. In fact, actually a little bit more flat, which I like over here in this contest. So both of those single entries, there's a really good chance I enter both of those out there for tomorrow. You've got this $44 20 max, which I don't usually like 20 maxing, but this is a pretty decent contest. The payout structure is 20% out there to first. So that's not the worst payout structure that we've ever seen. We've got the $200 single entry here, a little bit of a smaller single entry that you guys go out there and enter. And let me see if they have that $10 18 max, which, I would assume they have for Sunday, and they do. They do have the 18 max. That costs you $180 to go out there and max enter, which is the absolute nuts when it comes to the payout structure. So, it's kind of like the last few days. If you want to be smart about having a sustainable bankroll, you do the single entries. It could be the $12 single entries. They're the same thing as that $100, right? They've got a pretty good payout structure. $33. They've got the $5 single entries that you can go out there and check out. That $10 18 max, as we just mentioned as well, are all the different contests that I'd put towards the top end of my short list. In terms of your lineup construction, this is where I'm only going to take 1 or 2 guys starting towards the top. So for the sake of this lineup, I'm going to show you guys what that would look like. So I'm going to throw Colin Moore, in there, and then I'm going to scroll down because, by the way, taking 2 guys towards the top doesn't mean they have to be in the top 5, right? As I said before, these guys at like T13 are also live out there for placement. So I'm going to throw in a Colin Morikawa and then Shane Lowry as my second man in. Now, full transparency, I'm probably not playing Morikawa tomorrow. This is just for the sake of going out there and building a lineup with you guys, right? Kind of going through the thought process of building a lineup, because now that we have our placement points out of the way, the rest of our lineup is where I'm trying to generate leverage. So let's go out there and try and find some guys that are lower owned. So I'm going to throw in a Keegan Bradley starting in at +1, which, by the way, even at T27, it's not like he's getting us a bunch of placement points, but he could still finish top 10 if he goes out there and has himself a day. Towards the top end of the 7K range, I'm going to throw in a Will Zalatoris. Also has a relatively early tee time. And's going to be low owned to give us some leverage. It's thrown into Adam Scott, and I'm not even that worried about the names that I'm clicking here. I'm much more worried about the ownership that I'm playing. And even if you wanted to get frisky with the placement points and play a Justin Rose as your last man in, that of course would be maxing out your salary there at $6,800. You probably get away with it over there in the large field GPPs just because you have the 3 pivots and a Bradley, a Zalatoris, and Adam Scott who have got it all sub 10% ownership. But you can make an argument that with the weather edge that we have, right, the wind's really kicking up out there towards the second half of the day, that playing like a Lucas Glover as your last man in, right, taking the lower owned option, also the player that's been better on approach so far this week, might be the better play out there for GPPs tomorrow. And, this isn't always the case, right? There are some times where, playing guys at the top makes sense, especially when conditions aren't going to get harder as the day goes on. But we have to treat these Sunday showdown slates a little bit differently than usual when you've got these 20-mile-an-hour wind gusts, right, that are going to be really impacting some of those later starters. So that's the idea when it comes to your lineup construction. You want to find a fine balance between taking some of those placement points and then also not overloading on them as well. So So hopefully it gives you guys a good idea of how to go out there and build lineups for yourself. Now let me catch up in chat. If you have anything down there, I'll go through it there together. Smash that like button if you guys haven't already. Also subscribe to the SHIPIT Nation channel so you guys don't miss any of the content to come. As I mentioned, I will be there in person tomorrow, and one more piece of content to come this week as well. That, of course, will be our betting and prop preview a little bit later on tonight over there on my channel. If you guys enjoyed this content over there for DFS, and you also play over there on sites like Underdog, Prize Picks, or even for like matchup bets on sports books out there, make sure to check out my channel a little bit later on tonight. My channel is GSLukeDFS. It's GSLuke altogether, GS like Grand Slam, and then Luke. And then DFS is a separate word. Is how you can find me on YouTube and also over there on Twitter/X. We're going to go through all these pin locations. So as Nick mentioned, I'm going to do a full deep dive over there on that live stream, as well as going through that prop and betting side. But let's catch up on any of the DFS questions that we have for right now. And then hopping out of here, I've got some UFC lineups to sweat out as well, which I played both guys from the first fight. So kind of whatever there, but I'm curious to see what happens in the second and third fights. I've got some leverage spots out there in my lineups. You like Sam Burns for 7 birdies tomorrow and 1 eagle and 1 bogey? I'll remember that, Trevor. If you're right, credit where credit's due. I'll give it to you. And hey, if you're wrong, I'm not going to give you shit because I'm not that sort of guy. But I do want to see if you're right, because that'd be pretty awesome if you got that correct. And hey, by the way, if you think that's going to happen, play him in your lineups, please, because that would be a hell of a leverage play. Wear my Malbon tomorrow. He is winning. You know what, Nick? I'll wear the Malbon. I have a few outfits that are full Malbon that I can wear, and I'm going to bet him outright too, just because he said that. And what I've learned, guys, is that Nick, he's a sharp out here, right? I don't spend time messaging people in the community that aren't sharps, right? I don't mention the people that are the donators. Let's say that much. Nick is a sharp, so I respect him more than most, let's say, out there. In fact, more than just about everyone down there in this live chat. What's going on, Max? Do you need the winner tomorrow in the large field GPP, or could you start with Rory and Wyndham, which they could win, you guess? You're right there. And you're saying, could you avoid like Connors, Morikawa, and Henley? So yeah, I get what you're saying with that question. Like, do you have to take one of these guys in the top 5? I don't think you have to, right? Because if, let's say, the top end of the board is carnage, like all of them are shooting over par, one of them might win by shooting like even or +1, and you might not have to have them out there in GPPs. Now, do I think you have to avoid the top? Absolutely not, right? Like if you think somebody up there is going to shoot like -1, -2, go out there and win, then play them in your lineups. I think that's totally fine, but avoiding them is also a viable strategy. So I'm going to have lineups where I have 1, maybe 2 guys up there, and I'm also going to have lineups where I'm avoiding that whole top end of the board as well. Great question, Max. Alrighty, guys, that's all I've got. I appreciate you guys stopping by on the channel as per usual. Make sure to stop on my channel a little bit later on tonight out there for that prop and betting side, and let's ship it out there in some GPPs.